Hey students, my name is Jake. Last week we began this series called Prism. A prism is something that basically looks like a boring piece of glass until you shine a light on it or look at it from a different angle. All of a sudden there's colors and lights that you've never seen before. And we've been talking about how Jesus is a lot like that. Most of us have heard of Jesus, we may even know who he is and what he's like, but when we take a closer look or change our perspective, there's always something brand new to discover. We ask, wait, was that there the whole time? Growing up, I had an image of Jesus in my mind. Mostly it came from a painting of Jesus that my mom hung in our hallway. He looked angry, hungry, both at the same time. He was like hangry. He was glowing a little bit and he carried a lamb like a baby. And if I'm being honest, the picture was kind of creepy. Sometimes the way I picture Jesus in my mind actually goes back to that glowing picture in my hallway. Even if you didn't grow up in church, you've probably seen pictures of Jesus like this. But here's the thing, and you know this, they're not real. Cameras weren't even invented yet, but still, if you're like me, they can shape your mental image that comes to mind when somebody is talking about Jesus. Whether it's flowing hair Jesus, angry Jesus, overly nice Jesus, or surfer Jesus, maybe you have a strange view of what he's like based on an image that's been planted in your mind. And if you think about it, you wonder, is that it? Like, is that really it? The reality is, whether you believe in Jesus or not, whether you're religious or not, you have to admit that what Jesus did was pretty impressive. Someone who lived 2,000 years ago had a huge impact on humanity and history. So huge that our timeline divided into two parts that centered around his life. He literally divided history. Think about it. If you said his name to anyone almost anywhere in the world, they would recognize it. While there are billions of people who have walked this planet, most scholars talk about Jesus as the most significant human who has ever lived. And it makes you wonder, did all of that come from the guy I have in mind? Is Jesus really like the guy we see on paintings in our grandma's attic? And if he's not like what we imagine, then what's he like? In this series, we've been talking about who Jesus is and what he's like, really. And maybe nothing makes us wonder more than bad stuff. If Jesus really is God, what about all the bad stuff that happens in the world? Does Jesus even care? Things like war, hunger, injustice, pandemics, the list could go on for a long time. What about the bad, wrong, awful, evil stuff that happens in the world? Where is Jesus when it comes to fix all that stuff? Why doesn't he fix it? And when it comes to the awful stuff, am I really supposed to think that this guy, Jesus, is supposed to be the answer? Thankfully, we don't have to guess what Jesus is like. We can know in his own words. Not long after Jesus died and then came back to life, some of his friends and followers realized that he was really a big deal and that they wanted everyone to know about him. So they wrote down exactly what happened and shared the documents. In fact, when you open a Bible to the second section called the New Testament, the first 4 documents are all records of Jesus' life from people who actually knew him. Written by 4 different people with 4 different perspectives. One of those writers was a guy named Luke. Luke was a doctor, and he was really intentional about investigating and finding out the details of what happened. To do that, Luke interviewed people who spent time with Jesus personally and wrote down their accounts. In this one moment, Jesus' friends remember traveling back to Jesus' hometown where Jesus did something, well, kind of odd. But first, Luke mentions this. Then Jesus returned to Galilee, filled with the Holy Spirit's power. Reports about him spread quickly through the whole region. He taught regularly in their synagogues and was praised by everyone. When he came to the village of Nazareth, his boyhood home, he went as usual to the synagogue on the Sabbath and stood up to read the scriptures. The scroll of Isaiah the prophet was handed to him. So before we get to the odd thing that Jesus did, let's talk about this scroll situation. Jesus is in his hometown and gets handed a scroll, which was basically a really old spiritual document. This one contained words from a guy named Isaiah who lived 700 to 800 years earlier. Isaiah was a prophet, meaning he spoke on behalf of God. He was God's spokesperson to the whole world. Jesus chose a specific part of the scroll to read. Luke writes this. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where this was written. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim the captives will be released, that the blind will see, that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come. He rolled up the scroll, handed it back to the attendant, and sat down. All eyes in the synagogue looked at him intently. I know it sounds like Jesus just dropped the mic and sat down, but at that time, it was common for teachers to read the scriptures standing up and then sit down to talk about what they meant. So the people were waiting for Jesus to keep talking. Everyone in the room knew Isaiah's words. They grew up hearing them. Many people believed that Isaiah was talking about the Messiah, a future leader who would come and do what the words had said. Jewish people had spent hundreds of years hoping these words meant that God would one day send someone to make the wrong things right and to fix all the bad stuff in the world. So everyone was on the edge of their seats. That's why what happens next caused a bit of an uproar. Then he began to speak to them. The scriptures you just heard has been fulfilled this very day. Jesus looks them in the eyes and basically says, "It's me. I'm the one Isaiah was talking about." Now there was a real mic drop moment. In one sentence, Jesus makes it incredibly clear who he is. He's exactly who Isaiah was talking about and exactly who they had been waiting for. He was the one who would free the captives, heal the people, set people free, and ultimately make all wrong things right. Understandably, the people were amazed, confused, skeptical, and hopeful. Some had a hard time believing that God's solution to all the brokenness in the world came from their hometown. They were expecting a military conqueror, not a carpenter. But over the course of Jesus' life, he did exactly what he said he would. Over and over, through all the accounts from people who knew him, we learn that Jesus protected children, elevated women, spoke up for the poor, outsiders, and foreigners. Basically, all the people who were mistreated. He healed people who were hurting from diseases, and he confronted powerful people about how they treated the powerless people. In other words, when Jesus was on earth, he was constantly making wrong things right. He wasn't a sweet, adorable, glowy white guy with a lamb and sparkly blue eyes. In many ways, he was a revolutionary. He was the kind of guy who challenged the way things had always been done. He went out of his way to find places where the world wasn't the way God intended. Places like injustice, pain, oppression, and make all those things right. Jesus showed us over and over that he was on a mission to make his kingdom different. Of course, all this brings up a good question. If Jesus was the guy that Isaiah was talking about, the one who was gonna make all wrong things right, why is there still bad stuff in the world? That's a really good question. In fact, the people who were around Jesus wanted him to do miracles and fix all the bad stuff. Others who followed Jesus wanted him to become a political leader and change things for the good by taking power. But Jesus had a different plan for saving the world. Instead of magically fixing everything all at once, or overtaking the government and being in charge, he began to invite people around him to join him as he traveled. He taught them to do what's right. One by one, and then thousands by thousands, people began to follow him. Then, after he died and rose again, he sent the Holy Spirit to help those people, and the ones who would come after them. People like us, to do what he did and live like he did. Jesus had a plan for making wrong things right. It wasn't just miracles, it wasn't temporary politics, it was us. We're the plan. Of course, it would be quicker to just change everything with one miracle, but Jesus didn't just come to change what's wrong in the world. He came to change the hearts of the people so that wrongs don't keep happening. That's why we're invited to participate in what he's doing, because change happens in us when we are a part of the change happening in the world. In other words, not only can Jesus heal what's wrong in the world, he can also shape our hearts and heal them along the way. Every time I look closely at Jesus' life, I see something new and it surprises me. I didn't always think of Jesus as a revolutionary, but I do now. And I think if he was sitting here right now, he'd want you to remember this and never forget. You can be a part of making wrong things right. Will you fix everything? Will it all magically go away overnight? No. But with the Holy Spirit and alongside his people, more is possible than you can imagine. Try taking another look through the prism and seeing Jesus' plan differently. Maybe for you, that means when you see the bad stuff, instead of asking, "Where is God?" ask, "Where could Jesus be right now?" If you don't know for sure, read the accounts of him written by his friends in the New Testament. Pay attention when we talk about him here at the church. Go be like Jesus. Go do what he would do. If Jesus would speak up for hurting people, you can too. If Jesus looked out for people who were treated like outsiders, that's what you and I need to do. If Jesus took steps to help the poor and the sick, we can too. Maybe that sounds like a lot, but I want you to know that you don't have to do this alone. It's not all on you. We are all part of the plan. And if you are experiencing something difficult, you can know that Jesus cares and the church cares too. That's one of the reasons why small groups can be really helpful. When you see something wrong in the world and you want to take steps to make it right, your small group can join in and help. What if we believed that we can be a part of making wrong things right? What if we saw ourselves as part of the plan? What if we had the confidence to lean into God's power and see what He could do through us? Imagine how exciting it would be to see what happens. Jesus was a revolutionary for the good, and He can do revolutionary, world-changing things through us.